What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more Sting, and we're returning in this back and forth deep dive to The Dream of the Blue Turtles, 1985. Thank you again to Stefan, as well as to Michaela, who provided the Fields of Gold Greatest Hits compilation, and all those that may be following this journey. And the next tune is simply Russians. So, my only thought when I looked at it, because it is a single word title, and even though the meaning is more or less straight away, those types of titles are difficult to get a sense of because there's no context. But this is from '85. The Cold War is ongoing, and perhaps at a particularly heightened moment in the longer arc of the Cold War, with lots of nuclear saber rattling and the doomsday clock clicking or ticking ever so close to midnight. So in that regard, maybe Russians is here a synonym for Soviets, or as someone who has studied a bit of the Cold War and Soviet society as a historian, you know, Russians were the culturally and ethno-nationally dominant force of the Soviet Union, but they were by no means synonymous with the Soviet Union and its peoples at large. And of course, the political and military repression of non-Russian peoples in the Soviet sphere of influence is certainly a subject with much to say about it and different stories, but this is not a history lecture, so I will merely say, if I have a guess here, it's that this could relate to the Cold War, the Soviet Union, and maybe even more narrowly, Russians within the Soviet sphere. Before I misspeak anymore, let's give it a listen. This is Sting. The track is Russians, and it's from his 1985 album, The Dream of the Blue Turtle. Turtles. Sorry, plural.
To respond to all the threats and the rhetorical speeches of the
ticking ever so close to midnight on the doomsday clock. I love it for multiple reasons, and dare I say, I think my introduction was remotely, at least, in the right direction. And actually, what I'm going to say first, or most prominently here at the beginning of the outro, is something that maybe no one expected. I'm going to say that the main melodic line and its rhythm was surprisingly similar to the melody of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. It wasn't identical, a bit heavier, a bit darker, although that carol, especially in certain performances, I'm looking at you, Annie Lennox, has a darkness and a heaviness to it, even if the message is about warding off evil and the merry men who will be instruments in that cosmic battle are being praised and depicted more positively. But yes, the main melody, the whole, like right from the beginning, and at a couple points in particular, made me think of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. But I love the dark ambience and shadowy nature of the tune, which feels like it's very reflective of the danger we all face. And I would actually take the lyrics a step farther and say that not only do Russians and Americans and Western Europeans all share the same biology, regardless of ideology, but we all share this same little blue rock orbiting the sun, and thus mutually assured destruction, which I think is a major facet of what Sting is saying here. It will come for us all, and it feels like a song that is perhaps nearly as relevant in 2025 when anti-nuclear proliferation treaties are being abandoned, pushed aside, when saber rattling is on the rise again, and when the East versus West, or maybe more narrowly, Russia versus the US, kind of, sort of, depending on, what you think about the current president's dubious statements. Nevertheless, the point is the rivalry, the military standoff between Russia and the West, if it is a coherent entity anymore, is certainly something that seems quite relevant today, even if the Cold War was a more comprehensive, clearly distinguished, and indeed, he talks about both sides of the political fence. So yes, it's very much a Cold War song, very much a mutually assured destruction song, very much a like, hey, you know what gets lost in all this saber rattling and political rhetoric between Reagan and Khrushchev and the Soviet Union and the US and the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc and so on, are the humans who live in these countries, including those who have little to no impact or influence on military and geopolitical matters, and they're the ones that will pay the heavy cost. So let's hope that Russians love their children too, and like the song says, he doesn't buy the very, grandstanding comments of Khrushchev and the Soviet leaders, but neither does he buy or buy into the self-serving and hypocritical and or inaccurate statements of people like Reagan, who are like, oh, we're just here protecting our own citizens and so on, and that's why we're threatening to wipe out the evil empire and so on. So yes, I think it's a comprehensive condemnation across the political divide, across the world, and a reminder that regular everyday humans and their lives and their families and their livelihoods and their bodies, their biology, will be the ones that bear the cost, the price tag of all this ideological jostling. And I will say in that regard, it is reminding me of the musical/concept album Chess by Benny and Bjorn and Tim Rice that I'm currently going through, which it uses a chess contest as a microcosm of these larger macroscopic and geopolitical forces and contexts. So yeah, I very much enjoyed this one. Again, I love the heavy sonics, the cold, shadowy ambience of the tune, and Sting's vocals, which I think at a couple points, he really pushes it a bit and gets intense, which, the ticking of the clock, which is something I picked up on early enough in the tune. It was really coming to my mind like about halfway through the tune, and then it's one of the last sounds you hear as it's fading, so it feels very apropos, certainly if you're familiar with the concept of the doomsday clock. And as someone who has heard multiple songs reference 2 minutes to midnight, like Iron Maiden's immediately comes to mind, it's clearly a subject, and rightly so, that was on the minds of a lot of artists in different genres during the 80s, when again, it felt like at any moment, the ICBMs might start flying. And of course, now I'm thinking of Nana's incredibly well written song, translated into English as 99 Red Balloons, which, again, I think it's just so profound. The idea, and people take that different ways. Is it a metaphor for like weapons? I think it's actually more profound if you think about it as a literal red balloon, because the idea that someone just at a glance seeing something on a radar, freaking out, hitting a button, which leads to something launching, which leads to people in other places hitting their buttons, and the entire global civilization is destroyed, brought to its knees, kicked back to the Stone Age because of a simple child's toy. There's something tragically and epically profound about that. So now I'm thinking of all sorts of Cold War songs, but yeah, this is a great one. I absolutely enjoyed it. Instant favorite. Curious to hear what people have to say, and I will see you next time. Peace.